so is our lives in our country. With changing times, we have, as we all doctors have seen, a lot of changes in our practice methods. The one new thing which has happened, which is actually a new way forward, is taken up is telemedicine, which is been taken up by our government very seriously. I am Dr. Pradeep Jain, consultant pediatrician and intensivist at Fortis Balaji Hospital, Jodhpur, and senior consultant pediatric at Vasile Child Care. This is the bug which has changed our lives in recent years. And what has it done? It has brought the lockdown everywhere. My whereabouts have changed. Whereabouts have changed drastically. My new number is this hotline number from a telemedicine company. My address is Dr. Pradeep in my app. My email ID is within my address. People don't visit me at my houses. They visit me on my email, my Facebook ID, my telemedicine link, and I'm continuously using a lot of e-platforms for consultation with my patients, GQ, Library, and so on and so forth. So telemedicine is one thing which has come nicely. And there's something new which has happened recently in our country, and this is which has happened. You can see a new Gazette of India, which is called as Extraordinary Gazette, and has been published on 14th of May 2020. Today is 20th. It is as late as 14th May. And what does this say? This is healthcare showing new forwards in our country. In this Gazette, there has been made a board of governors. It's called as BOG, in supersession of Medical Council of India, MCI. And this notification was finalized on 12th May, published on 14th May 2020. And we are here. What has this done? This has brought some amendments in the functioning of MCI. The Board of Governors in supersession of Medical Council of India with previous sanction of central government, and they have made following regulations to amend Indian Medical Council, Professional Conduct Etiquette and Ethics Regulation 2002. So this can be called as IMC Regulation 2020, and these regulations, they are considered effective from 25th March 2020, which is the date on which central government accorded approval of these regulations. You may call it 2020 amendments in 2002 regulations. So numbers are same, 2020. In India, the Medical Council regulations 2002, following additions will be made after this amendment, which has occurred in March 2020. The consultation through telemedicine by registered medical practitioner under IMC Act 1956 shall be permissible in accordance with telemedicine practice guidelines. So these guidelines are important for all of us to understand. Now, these telemedicine practice guidelines are designed to serve as an aid and tool to enable all registered medical practitioners to effectively leverage telemedicine with the aim to enhance health services access to all of us in India. Telemedicine guidelines are not applicable to use of the digital technology. These are don'ts we should remember. Our digital technology cannot be used to conduct surgical or an invasive procedure from distance. There are many lists of the drug lists are made separately, and they are as per they are to be followed while practicing telemedicine. And these drug lists can be modified by this BOG from time to time as per need. The Board of Governance Supervision of Medical Council of India may issue necessary directions or advisories or clarifications in regard to these guidelines, which has been decided on the month of May. Telemedicine guidelines can also be amended from time to time in larger public interest with the prior approval of central government, especially Ministry of Family Welfare to be So let's come to these telemedicine practice guidelines, which we all should know. These guidelines are enabling registered medical practitioners to provide healthcare using telemedicine. So what is definition? The definition is given by WHO. Let us divide it into various questions. So what is it? It is delivery of healthcare services. Where and when? It is delivered when, it is used when delivery is For delivery, the distance is a critical factor. It can be delivered by whom? It can be delivered by all registered healthcare professionals. How? Using information and communication technologies for the for exchange of valid information and with the purpose of diagnosis, treatment, prevention of disease and injuries, research, and evaluation. Continuing research, along with it, continuing education of healthcare providers, and the ultimate aim of all these activities is going to be advancing the health of individuals and the communities. There's one more term which has been discussed in this. It is telehealth. Now, telehealth is a broader spectrum, a word which covers things in a broader spectrum. And telehealth actually includes delivery and facilitation of health and healthcare related services, which include medical care as one of its components, along with provider and patient education, along with health information services, self-care via telecommunication, and digital health, digital communication technologies. So, what is the difference between two? In general, telemedicine is used to denote clinical service provided by RMP, while telehealth, we all should know, is a broader term of use of technology for health and health-related services, which include medicine, and that is telemedicine. Its component. We should be aware of some definitions, which words will be used again and again during this discussion of ours. First is RMP. RMP is a person who is enrolled in state medical register or the Indian medical register under IMC Act 1926. Now, once we talk of telemedicine, the question arises: why should we use telemedicine? It is a very small period of pandemic. Once it is over, why do we need it? So let's find out why it is useful. Telemedicine is enabler of healthcare access and affordability. It increases the timely access and appropriate intervention, including faster access also, and the access to services which may not be otherwise available. Like there are many specialties which might not be available. We don't have a very high-end genetic people in a city like Jodhpur. So their telemedicine can help. Likewise, depending on various cities, various type of specialties or services may not be available. One of the major advantages of telemedicine can be saving of cost and effort, especially for rural patients, as they need to travel long distances for obtaining consultations. The fees of doctor is somewhere between 300 to 500, and all medical expenses less than 1,000. But the cost of traveling sometimes constitutes more than 3 to 5 times. So that can be taken care by use of this technology. This reduces cost and stress of traveling. It also reduces inconvenience and impact to family and caregivers and other social factors. Telemedicine can also play a particularly important role in cases where there is no need to see physically. No need to see, RMP may not see the child, for example, for regular checkups, for routine checkups, for continuous monitoring. And thus, telemedicine can reduce a lot of burden from secondary healthcare facilities, especially hospitals. With the use of telemedicine, it is higher likelihood of maintenance of records and documentation. Hence, it minimizes the likelihood of missing out on advice from doctors, other healthcare. I have seen during these days that compliance of parents have improved because instructions they go in writing. Every instruction goes in writing, and thus, or there's a recording with them, and thus it is being heard or seen again and again. The dosage, the timing, the frequency, the volume, all are being taken care of. And similarly, doctor has an exact document of advice provided by teleconsultation, and this reduces legal protection and confusion for the doctors also. There are times when patient says, "Sir, aapne try nahi tha," but then when we find out, see that it has been very rarely written. So written thing has a great value. This is how this record keeping helps. It also helps as a safety from contagious disease only to doctors and other healthcare workers, especially in contagious situations like this, which we are facing. Adherence to medication regime, as I said, is improved with the help of telemedicine technology. Continuous monitoring is also possible with telemedicine. Patient may write down or mention, or there may be a digital method to transfer data like blood sugar, glucose, etc. In disasters and pandemics, which in a situation like these which we are facing right now, these things they pose a unique challenge to healthcare provider. Telemedicine solves a lot of them, not all. Is well suited for scenario in which medical practitioner can evaluate and manage patients. A telemedicine visit can be conducted without exposing staff to viruses or other infections in the times of such outbreak. Telemedicine can prevent the transmission break. It really helps the government's cause of uh, social distancing and lockdown and isolation. Risk for both patients and healthcare workers. Unnecessary avoidable exposures of the people involved in delivery of healthcare can be avoided using telemedicine, and patient can be screened remotely. It can provide rapid access to medical practitioners who may not be immediately available to persons. Okay. In addition, it makes available extra working hands for physical care, and thus it has been seen that the health systems that have invested in telemedicine before this or in the past, they are well positioned to ensure that patients with COVID-19 kind of issues receive the care they need. So it's a high time for a country like us, and it's a good time for us to grab the opportunity to develop telemedicine, and we all should practice more and more. Other than individual advantages, there are a lot of community advantages and managerial advantages of telemedicine. The government is committed to provide equal access to quality care to all, and digital health is the critical enabler of overall transformation of the health system. Hence, the mainstreaming of telemedicine in health system will minimize inequity and barriers to the access. India's digital health policy advocates the use of digital tools for improving efficiency and outcome of healthcare system. Okay, it lays significant focus on use of telemedicine services, especially in health and wellness center at grassroots level. With the help of this, a middle-level healthcare provider can connect patient to doctors through technology platform, providing timely and best possible advice for patients, and thus saves a lot of complications. But what was happening till now? There were a lot of uncertainties in use of medical practice of telemedicine in a formal level. There were lack of clear guidelines, and that created significant ambiguity for registered medical practitioners in doubt about the practice. There was one very turnaround point in 2018 when a judgment of Honorable High Court of Mumbai that created much more uh, doubts in the patient healthcare workers. So there were many laws uh, under which it was not very clear what will happen in what situation. And these gaps in legislation and uncertainty of rules pose a risk for both doctors and patients. Seeing that a new method, a new step, new effort was done by our administrators, and they studied methods of telemedicine in various countries, and it was two basic principles, two basic methods. One was legislation and professional norms, making legislation norms and professional norms. So our board of governors reviewed all these guidelines, and they consulted to look at these guidelines to enable medical practitioners to practice telemedicine. So understanding all importance, we should understand that telemedicine is come here and will continue to grow and will be adopted by more and more healthcare practitioners and also patients in a wide variety of forms. And these guidelines will be a framework for all of us for its growth. Now, the purpose of these guidelines would be, of course, the practical advice to doctors so that services of service and models of care used by doctors and healthcare workers are encouraged to consider the use of telemedicine as a part of our practice. The government wants that we, all doctors and healthcare providers, should consider telemedicine as a normal part, as a routine part of our practice. These guidelines will assist medical practitioners in pursuing a sound course of action to provide effective and safe medical care founded on current information available and current available resources. The patient needs to ensure patient and provider safety. These guidelines will also help realize full potential of advancement of technology in healthcare delivery. It provides norms and protocols relating to physician-patient relationship, issues of liability, and we'll discuss all these in detail in coming slides. So let's come to the main thing. As there are advantages, there are certain possibilities of abuse also. Like other technology, the technology used for telemedicine can be abused. There are certain risks, some drawbacks and limitations, which can be mitigated with appropriate training, enforcement of standards, protocols, and guidelines. These guidelines should be used in conjunction with other national guidelines for clinical standards, or protocols, policies, and procedures. They are not isolated, standalone, and they don't uh, uh, cover up all other guidelines. They all should be continued. So, with this background, let us understand what are the important issues which we clinicians are likely to face. And I have divided into various questions and answers. Let us see. So, let us understand first who are entitled to provide telemedicine, because who can give. So, we have understood who is a registered medical practitioner, and all registered medical practitioners are uh, uh, qualified to provide this telemedical consultation, and but they should follow prerequisites. Okay, all of them. Now, MCI, Board of Governors, who supersedes the MCI, they have decided, they have given a guideline that all of us who want to practice telemedicine should take an online course to practice telemedicine. So let's see what are the prerequisites. MCI, right now there are no existing telemedicine course, but MCI is in process of developing an online telemedicine course to ensure uniformity of the practice of telemedicine. So once the course is developed, which is not a reality right now, it will be mandatory for all the RMPs to undertake this course within 3 years of its notification. Okay? The RMP using telemedicine shall uphold the same professional and ethical norms and other standards as applicable to traditional in-person care within the intrinsic limitation of telemedicine. All rules remain same. And once this guidelines there available, then all RMP should undergo. Till then, those guidelines are available. Interim guidelines, these guidelines will work as interim guidelines, and as on date, because the course is not available, all RMPs can teleconsult, provided they follow our telemedicine practice guideline with all the modifications. Okay, so now in this guideline, the Government of India has mentioned scope of the guidelines, and so what is the scope? They are meant for RMPs. We know that they cover norms and standards of the RMP to consult patient via telemedicine. Telemedicine include all channels of communication with the patient leverage information, all technology patterns, including voice, audio, text, and digital data exchange. In this guideline, currently no mention is made of specification for hardware and software, specification of infrastructure, building and maintenance. There is no specification of data management systems. Okay? The use of digital technology cannot be done to conduct surgical or invasive procedure remotely, as I mentioned earlier also. Other aspect of telehealth and research and evaluation, there are no guidelines as of now. And we should remember these guidelines does not provide permission to consult outside jurisdiction of India. So what is the summary then? All RMPs can practice anywhere within India. So next question is, can a healthcare worker or healthcare worker or a care provider do teleconsultation for patient? The answer for this is yes. Sometimes the child may be very small, or a patient may be incapacitated, or not in condition to speak or communicate himself in this situation or any other similar situation. A healthcare worker such as ANM, etc., can do teleconsultation for a given patient. There are separate guidelines for this also. Telemedicine applications, these guidelines, they say these. I hope my voice is okay. Okay. These now the guidelines about telemedicine applications. Currently, the RMP may use any telemedicine tool suitable for carrying out technology-based patient consultation. It can be telephone, it can be video, it It can be devices connected over LAN, WAN, internet, mobile phones, landline phones, chat platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, or any other mobile app, or internet-based digital platform for telemedicine, or a data transfer system like Skype, email, fax. Irrespective of tool of communication used, the core principle of telemedicine remains the same. Now, classification. Telemedicine applications for understanding can be four basic types. It can be according to mode of communication. It can be according to timing of information transmission. It can be purpose of consultation and interaction between individual involved. It can be RMP to patient, RMP to caregiver, or RMP to RMP. There is one more classification according to modes of communication. It can be video, audio, or text-based. According to timing of information transmitted, real-time video, audio, or text interaction, or asynchronous exchange of any relevant information. You'll see examples of this while understanding it further. So, let's see example of these. Let's see example of these. Now, real time could be video, audio, text for exchange of relevant information for diagnosis, medication, education, and counseling. Asynchronous exchange could be like transmission of summary of patient's complaint, supplemented data, including images, lab reports, or radiological investigation between the stakeholders. Such data can be forwarded to different parties at any point of time, and there are access as per convenience or need. Okay. Now the other classification could be according to purpose of consultation. We can divide it into non-emergency consult and emergency consult. Non-emergency consult can be further divided into first consult with any RMP for diagnosis, treatment, health education, or counseling. Follow-up treatment with the same RMP after one teleconsultation, or for follow-up consultation for ongoing treatment with the same RMP who prescribed treatment earlier in person consult. So these are there are two different types of it. Emergency consultation. This can be done for immediate assistance or first aid. In case alternative care is not present, teleconsultation may be teleconsultation is the only way for timely care. In such situations, RMP may provide consultation to best of their judgment. For example, if there is some foreign body stuck somewhere, so one can guide how to handle the foreign body if it is very superficial and things like that. Telemedicine services should, however, be avoided for emergency care when an alternative in-person care is available, and telemedicine consultation should be limited to first aid, life-saving measure, counseling, and advice for it. In all cases of emergency, the patient must be advised for an in-person interaction with the nearest RMP at earliest. Now, one important classification for patient care point of view and medical legal point of view is according to individual involved. Individuals could be a patient to RMP. Patient can directly communicate to registered medical practitioner, which is the commonest thing. Caregiver to RMP, but when it is very common in pediatric patients, when patients directly doesn't interact completely, partially or completely, a caregiver gives it. RMP to RMP. It is again very important method of telecommunication for patient care, in which issues of care of one or more patients can be discussed, or it can be used to disseminate knowledge. Healthcare worker to RMP has been approved in Indian guidelines. A healthcare worker can facilitate consultation of a session or a patient with an RMP. In doing so, the former, that is RMP, can take help in taking history. The RMP can be helped by the healthcare worker for taking for examination of patient and conveying the findings. They can also reverse the way, explain and reinforce the advice given to the patient by RMP. So, as we said, there are different modes of communication, and there are advantages and disadvantages of each mode. Ideally, I would suggest that we should use a combination of all three to get an optimal information and optimal direction as far as treatment and guidance is concerned. So the most useful mode would be a video mode. It is a telemedicine facility, by apps or video on chat platforms, etc. This is strength of this video consult. It is closest to an in-person consult and a real-time interaction. In this, patient identification is easier. RMP can see the patient and discuss with the caregiver. Visual cues found in a video counseling can be picked up, and inspection of patient can be carried out. But there are limitations of this also. It is dependent on high quality internet connection at both ends, and otherwise it will lead to suboptimal exchange of information. Since there is some possibility of abuse, misuse with this video consult, ensuring of privacy of patients in video consults is extremely important. So next common is audio. We use very frequently on phone and other apps. It is very convenient, fast, doesn't need too much of data. Reach is unlimited, suitable for urgent cases. There are certain areas where light is very less. Far rural Rajasthan, like one of the places, we get a lot of telephonic calls, and video calls are very difficult to achieve. So in this, no separate infrastructure is required. Privacy is ensured, and it's a real-time scenario. Limitation, of course, the non-verbal cues may be missed. It is not suitable for conditions that require visual inspection. For example, so any rash on skin, conjunctivitis, examining tongue, throat, okay, or physical touch, of course. Patient identification needs to be clearer. There are greater chances of imposters than representing the real patients. Third common is text-based, which is again very popular with the advent of WhatsApp and other similar apps. It is a specialized chat-based telemedicine. It can be used on smartphones, apps, SMS websites, messaging systems, and things like those. Strength, it is very convenient. People are already used to it. Thanks to WhatsApp. It's quick. Documentation is very good in this. Identification may be an integral feature of the platform. Suitable for urgent cases, for follow-ups, for second opinions, and gives it, provided RMP has enough contact from other sources, no separate infrastructure required, and can be real time. And most important is a documentation and the memory remains. Okay. Limitation is the visual and physical touch. Text-based interactions also miss the verbal cues. Difficult to establish rapport with the patient just by writing, and one cannot be sure of identity of the doctor or of the patient. Then there are other modes like asynchronous modes, like email, fax recording, etc. Standards, again, they are very used from time immemorial, long time. It is convenient, easy to document again. Everybody has email these days, no specific app or download requirement. Image data and reports can be readily shared, no separate infrastructure required. More useful when accompanied with the test reports and follow-up and second opinion. Limitation are, it's not real-time interaction, it is one-way contacts available, relying solely on articulation by the patient. Patient identification is document-based only, and difficult to confirm. Non-verbal cues are missed. There may be delays because doctor may not see the mail immediately. So, consider that, as I said, it's good to use all four methods simultaneously. We can use existing social platforms very easily. Everybody has it. It is a written thing. It gives you documentation. Then you can have an audio or a video calling that covers the rest of it. So it becomes an ideal sort of thing. Many such apps are also available. Many companies are coming with similar apps. Okay. So now, for guidelines of telemedicine in India, the professional judgment of RMP should be guiding principle. This is the basic philosophy for all telemedicine consultation. It is the intuition and the third sense that which comes from knowledge and experience of doctor, which is the guiding. RMP is well positioned to decide whether a technology-based consultation is sufficient or in-person reviews. So when you practice, you should be very confident that, and you should be sure that whatever information you got is good enough to make diagnosis. And as far as my experience of telemedicine is concerned, I really believe 80 to 90% patients of new illnesses, they can really manage well, especially in medical patients in which a very good differential diagnosis can be established by taking a proper detailed history from a right person. Practitioner should exercise proper discretion and not compromise with the quality. This is a very important part of it. 7 elements need to be considered before beginning any teleconsultation. First would be, of course, context. What is the context of teleconsultation? Identification of RMP and patient is very important. Mode of communication has to be decided. Consent is very important part of it. We'll discuss in some details. Type of consultation, what should be used in what situations, and we should try and use all 4 modalities of consultation. Then comes patient evaluation, patient management. So telemedicine should be appropriate and sufficient as per context. The RMP should exercise a professional judgment to whether a telemedicine consultation is appropriate in a given situation or an in-person consultation is needed in the interest of patient. Suppose we have done a video calling and we see a healthy playing child with history of loose motions, and a lot of things can be done for loose motion and making differential diagnosis of it. And if we see patient healthy moving with signs of good dehydration and historical clues to good dehydration, they can really manage it. If we see similarly for diarrhea, we see a sick, drowsy, lethargic patient who is not able to drink, not passing urine adequate times, eyes are sunken. These are the situations where emergency consults, in-person consults are required. So this discussion has to be done by us, and most of the things can be sorted. The RMP should also consider the mode technology available and the adequacy of diagnosis before choosing to proceed with any health education or counseling. Adequacy of diagnosis should be satisfactorily done. They should be reasonably comfortable that telemedicine is in interest of patient after taking holistic view of the situation. Complexity of patient's health condition. Every patient, every case or medical condition may be different. For example, a new patient presented with simple complaint such as headache, while we may have a patient with diabetes who comes with diabetic ketoacidosis. So RMP should uphold all these standards of care as they do in-person consultation, but within the intrinsic limitation of telemedicine. Identification of registered medical practitioner and patient is required. Telemedicine consult should not be anonymous. Both patient and the RMP should know each other's identity. RMP should verify and confirm patient's identity by name, age, address, email ID, and phone number, registered ID, or any other identification as it may need to be appropriate. When I'm seeing patients on telemedicine these days, many of them who are not able to move from one city for lockdown reasons, there are various things I follow. One of the simplest things which I do is I request all the patients to put up the prescription of the last doctor they have seen for their child. So that serves most of the things, or any other medical record, or any other discharge. So that gives a lot of identity. It's a lot of identification purpose. Similar things can be done depending on the age and the type of patient. The RMP should ensure that there is a mechanism for a patient to verify credentials and contact the details of RMP. So whenever we give prescription, our prescription, otherwise also by legislation, should have our qualification, our address, our medical council registered number, and everything. So for issuing prescription, RMP needs to explicitly ask about the age of patient, and if on video calling or other methods appears age is not as what if there's any doubt, we should seek age. Where the patient is minor, after confirming the age, teleconsultation should be allowed only if the minor is consulting along with adult. The minor is not allowed to consult for himself or herself. An adult on behalf can be taken. RMP should begin consultation by informing the patient about his or her name and qualification. So when I consult, I tell I'm Dr. Pradeep and I'm a pediatrician working here and here. These are my things. Every RMP shall display registration number according to him or her by state and medical council on prescription. That goes without saying, and that is otherwise also a part of all types of consultations. Now comes the mode of telemedicine. We have discussed them on audio, video, and written in asynchronous time. Now the patient's consent. So this is an important part of telemedicine consultation. It is necessary. If a patient calls himself, sorry, if the patient calls himself by herself, it is the consent is implied. It's like the patient is coming for OPD and we need not take consent. Okay. So if patient has started teleconsult from his side, the consent is implied. Now, if the RMP initiates telemedicine or healthcare provider initiates telemedicine, uh, explicit patient consent is needed. It can be recorded in any form. Patient can send an email, text, audio, video message. Patient can state that he intends to or he is willing to take a telemedicine consultation. And RMP should keep this record. Now, exchange of information for patient evaluation. After all this initial practices, the RMP should make all efforts to gather as much medical information about the patient condition before making any professional judgment. And it is a dictum in our practice that 70 to 80% information about any illness comes from a good history. And we always say the patient tells us what the disease is. So a good history really clearly goes long term. Especially being a pediatrician, I'm very sure that we can make 80 to 90% of required working diagnosis by taking good history. Okay. RMP would use his or her professional discretion to gather the type and extent of patient information by history, which is most important. Then inspection in this case, investigation reports, past records, and this will help us to exercise proper clinical judgment. This information can be supplemented by conversation with the healthcare worker or provider if any is there, and with the help of any technology too. If the RMP feels that the information received is inadequate, he or she can request for additional information from the patient. So, for example, in our cases, once the history is being given by somebody, one of the family members, we can take help of other family members or somebody else who looks after the child patient. This information may be shared in real time or shared via letter or email later on, as per nature of information. For example, it can be some laboratory tests or some radiological tests available. In such instances, when there is a telecommunication and a gap, and telecommunication and a gap, it is called as pause and resume consultation. Okay, and RMP should also provide health education in any such situations. In case, now there's a question in everybody's mind, including mine, was there earlier. In case I feel the patient requires a physical examination, how do I ensure that? It has been said very clearly in guidelines that RMP has all the rights to pause his or her teleconsultation and recommend inpatient anytime during the phase of any stage in the phase of consultation or diagnosis making. And besides, if during teleconsultation appears that a physical examination is mandatory but not visible on the mode being used for teleconsultation, the teleconsultation can be aborted and the patient can be referred to in-person. Law supports us, protects us, and it can be done anytime, in mid of, towards the end, or just before writing the prescription. So let us talk something about limitations also. It has got its own set of limitations for adequate examination. Now, as discussed earlier also, physical examination is critical for information. We should not proceed until a physical examination can be arranged through in-person consult. Wherever necessary, depending on professional judgment of RMP, he or she can recommend, he should recommend a video consultation, examination by other RMP or health worker available nearby, or in-person consultation by himself. The information required to make diagnosis and treatment may vary from one RMP to other, depending on his or her professional experience and discretion, and for different medical conditions, based on defined clinical standards and standard treatment guidelines, one can follow his or her own method. Now, one important aspect of telemedicine consultation is also a first consultation or a follow-up consultation. So there's definitive definitions. So what is first consultation? It should be very clear. Of course, patient coming for first time is first consultation. Patient consulted if the patient is consulted the same RMP earlier, but more than 6 months have elapsed, it will be considered as a first consultation. Or the patient has consulted the RMP, but for different illness. Now, patient consulted me 15 days back with pain abdomen, and now he comes with some skin disorder. So it may be a different health condition. Okay, so all these categories would be considered as a first consultation. So it has an implication on progress of telemedicine. Now, what is follow-up consultation? The follow-up consultation is consulting with same RMP within 6 months of his or her previous in-person consultation, and this is for the continuum of care for same health condition. However, it will not be considered as follow-up if the patient has come up with new symptoms that are not likely to be spectrum of the same health condition, and also it would be considered as a new consult if RMP does not have any memory or recall of context of previous treatment or advice. So finally it comes to RMP, whether to consider it. RMP is not remembering, there is no document to make him remember, so it can be very well considered as a first consultation. So now something about patient management, health education, and counseling and medication. There are 4 aspects which we can do. If condition can be appropriately managed, once we have seen the patient, taken history, and we feel that the condition can be helped on telemedicine based on type of consultation, then RMP has rights to do health education appropriate for the case, provide counseling related to specific clinical condition, and prescribe medicine. Okay, the most important thing which we need to intricacies of what are the guidelines for prescribing medicines as far as telemedicine is concerned, and these 2 are also important things which we can help. When it comes to a newborn care, we are getting a lot of counseling during specific health conditions for feeding issues, for hydration issues, for temperature issues, and for issues like pain abdomen. They are very commonly being done with every pediatrician. So health education. So what health education can RMP impart? It can be related to diet, physical activities, cessation of smoking, contagiousness of the infections, and so on. This part is important in current scenario. Likewise, he or she may give advice on immunizations, especially flu immunizations in this current scenario, various types of exercise, hygiene practices, hand washing currently, and mosquito control. Counseling, specific counseling can be done to regarding food restrictions, do's and don'ts for anti-cancer drugs, proper use of hearing aids, home physiotherapy, etc. to mitigate some underlying condition. Physical advices for caring for a child, and he may also include advice for new investigations to be carried out before next month. Then comes most important, prescribing medications. Prescribing medications by a telemedicine consultant is at a professional discretion of RMP. It entails same professional accountability. We should remember it entails same professional accountability as in the traditional in-person consult. If a medical condition requires a particular protocol to diagnose and prescribe, as in case of in-person consult, and then same prevailing principles will be applicable to a telemedicine. Same will be the legalities. RMP may prescribe medicines via telemedicine only when RMP is satisfied that he or she has gathered adequate and relevant information regarding patient's medical condition, and prescribed medicine which is going to prescribe are in best interest of patient's well-being. Prescribing medicine without an appropriate diagnosis or provisional diagnosis will account to a professional misconduct. So please don't do it. There are specific restrictions by the government for various types of consultation. There are certain types of limitations on prescribing telemedicine consult via telemedicine, depending upon type of consultation and mode of consultation also. The categories of medicine that can be prescribed by teleconsultations are notified in the central government guidelines. So there are 3 categories: List O, List A, List B. List O comprise of medicines which are safe to be prescribed through any mode of consultation, whether it's audio, video, text, anything. In essence, they would comprise of those medicines which are commonly known as OTC drugs, and they include paracetamol, ORS solutions, cough lozenges, medicine that deemed to be necessary during public health emergency. List A are those medications which can be prescribed during the first consult, which is video consultation, and are being re-prescribed or refilled in case of follow-up. Okay, so list A are when list A medicines are prescribed, video consultation is must. It would be an individual list containing relatively safe medicine with low potential of abuse. The list of medication which RMP can prescribe in a patient who is undergoing follow-up consult as a refill. List B is a list of medication where RMP can prescribe in a patient who is undergoing follow-up consultation, in addition to those which have been prescribed during in-person consult for the same medical. And there is a prohibited list, and this contains Schedule H drugs, which includes narcotics and psychotropic substance, and they are of high potential of abuse and harm to the patient. These should not be used. The list available. It is comprehensive but not all inclusive, and this is available in that guidelines. You can have a look. I'll share guidelines for those who need it. This is a question we should answer to ourselves. Can Schedule H class drugs be prescribed on teleconsultation? Or which class of drugs have been enabled by guidelines for teleprescription? For a telemedicine guideline, the classification like Schedule H or Schedule, they have not been done. They are not approved. Okay, so the classification is separate here. It is O, A, or B, and we should follow accordingly. Okay, of course, we have to avoid Schedule X or narcotic drugs. Now, the biggest question for a physician or a pediatrician would be, can I prescribe antibiotics in teleconsultations? So, answer for this is yes, we can prescribe. The RNA-RMP can prescribe if we strongly are convinced about the same based the type and mode of consultation. Any such, as such, all teleconsultation mandate a clear documentation by provisional diagnosis and reasons for prescription of a particular drug. This is well applicable for antibiotics also. Okay, so once RMP is writing an antibiotic, he or she is completely responsible for his or her prescription. So if you feel antibiotic is needed, you can prescribe it. If during this course of lecture you feel there are any questions, you please write on this chat feature, and I'll be getting those questions. So you are free to ask questions whenever you feel like. Okay. So antibiotics is one important thing. Now the question is, can I prescribe injectable drugs, injectable medications? So the answer for this is yes. Of course, in certain settings it may be prescribed to a health worker or administered to a given patient. In such scenario, the RMP must be confident of the setting of the facility and technical expertise of the health worker, who may be any nursing staff. The exception to these would be prescribing some follow-up medications, such as like the patient uses himself, insulins or vaccines or some types of low molecular weight heparins. And injection should be prescribed only when there is a consultation between RMP to RMP primarily, sometimes to health worker. It should not be prescribed directly to a patient or a caregiver. Do I need to keep screenshots of records for safeguard myself? Answer would be yes. It is specified in all the guidelines, and it is very important for all the RMP to maintain following records and documents for the period described from time to time. Right now it is 3 years. These should include log or record of telemedicine interactions, phone logs, email records, chats, text record, video interaction logs, etc. The RMP is also supposed to maintain patient records, documents, images, diagnostic data, digital or non-digital, etc., which were the basis of diagnosis and treatment. Okay, and especially in the cases when it is being prescription is shared to the patient. Recently, there were stories that legal dispute, the judgment has been done, given the doctors are not supposed to communicate on WhatsApp. So this is the old story, and the current status is IMC Act, and the IMC Act was not there, but now the RMPs are empowered and legally protected against this 2020 amendment that they are free to provide teleconsultation by any mode for various settings as specified in document. So we are legally have all rights. So we should also know about some adverse legal things as far as How much time is left? I'll cover accordingly. Okay, so I hope you all enjoying this thing. It's something new. Uh, the unfortunate part is I'm not having any link to whether what is the expression, how are you feeling about it. Okay, so what are the legal effects of inadequate management as perceived by the patient? So we should all know that telemedicine guidelines comprehensively provides various settings under which different modes of teleconsultation can be undertaken, and also enunciates steps to be undertaken to prevent any miscommunication between the patient and RMP. Besides this, these guidelines also mention steps to be taken to ensure documentation and avoid legal issues. However, despite these measures, patient has still all rights if he perceives inadequate management, which can happen also in in-person consultation and happens many times to many great people also. The legal issues need to be dealt in the same manner as if it is an in-person consultation. Other common problem with many of my seniors feel like, what happens if a doctor does not want or wishes to attend to requests made by phone or WhatsApp? Telemedicine guidelines in this context are inside of doctors. It mentions that RMP has a liberty to not to attend teleconsultation requests made by patient. In orders, what happens? RMP can choose either to attend a call or not in orders, and RMP can also choose not to provide consultation to a patient if it does not suit the RMP during duty hours. So, the patient has the right to choose doctors, doctor has the right to choose the patient. This holds true for even this mode of communication. There are questions regarding trauma, emergency, and if RMP asks for immediate referral to the hospital and patient insists for telemanagement for some non-medical reason or some social personal reason, what RMP should do. So, in this situation, the doctor should record his or her statement. He should record about the advice which given regarding referral for in-person consult as specified in the guidelines and referral. Even after this, a patient insists the best possible care that can be given to him through teleconsultation in form of advice, counseling, first-aid measures, enable immediate relief of the patient should be provided. Basic thing is same. If we are thinking in patient interest, everything is right. In case the consultation through a healthcare worker or RMP, advice on medication and specific guidelines can be done in emergency situation. So this becomes an RMP to RMP consultation. Now, in case of a problems with internet connectivity and the resultant telephonic consult may be poor quality, what should be done in this context? This is again an issue in Western Rajasthan, and I think in various parts of country still. In such issue, if there's an issue of connectivity in the beginning of the consult, RMP may choose not to proceed with consultation, citing the reason to the patient. Now, if the issue of poor connectivity happens during the course of communication, the same should be recorded and kept as a proof. Will the prescription sent online? Next question is, will the prescription sent online as an image or scan be honored by local chemists? Yes. The following are the specified in guidelines. If RMP prescribes medicines, the RMP shall issue a prescription as per IMC Act, and the simple format of suggestive form is there available in this chart. RMP can also provide photo scan, a digital copy of a signed prescription or an e-prescription to present via email or any other messaging platform. Okay. So, in case RMP is transmitting the prescription directly to pharmacy, what are the guidelines? We should take explicit consent from the parents. Do I need to print out prescription? No. We can just provide e-prescription. That is good enough. It's a long topic, but one important issue, because it's taking a lot of time now, I think I should find out, I should write out. There are issues of privacy and confidentiality, which we should maintain. There are laws in favor of it. And if any breach in confidentiality or privacy is there because of a telemedical company or from somebody else other than RMP, the RMP will not be at fault and he will be protected. Misconduct will be considered if RMP willfully compromise patient care or privacy or confidentiality or violate any prevailing law are explicitly not permissible. Okay, otherwise not. This can be few examples like RMP misusing patient's images, RMP misusing the information of the patient. Like there are a lot of laws which can be all found, but one important issue is how to tackle fees issue. It has been very clearly mentioned that for the purpose of fees in telemedicine consultation, the guidelines specify that the telemedicine consultation should be treated in the same way as an in-person consultation. From fee perspective, and RMP has all rights to charge an appropriate fee for the telemedicine consultation provided. In fact, that the telemedicine consultation has been initiated, it means that both patient and the doctor have usually consented for the same, and there are specified laws and flow charts for it. We are very soon having one more session on telemedicine because it's a good topic. I think a lot of questions are there, a lot of things are to be answered. But during this last 1 hour or so, I tried to sensitize all of you to please take up this specialty, please take up this technology because this is future and this is right time that governments have allowed us. The laws were against telemedicine till 6 months back, but now they are in favor of it. It is going to make our life very easy and will be available everywhere. We can provide even in odd hours, odd places, odd times, and it can be a very good, important, satisfactory source of private practice also. I think I'll stop here. Thank you all for patient hearing, and I'm open to all questions if there are any. I'm really happy to answer. Thank you. I think now I really want to know, are there any questions? 14?
Hello, sir. This is Sarita.
Yes, Sarita, please.
Yeah, we got few questions, very few questions.
Okay.
Actually, it was very well covered. Everything was covered.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question is like pertaining to the affordability. So one of the doctor, he want to understand, is it useful for poor people to consult via telemedicine?
Okay. Like as far as fees is concerned, it is basically doctors to decide how to take fees and how much to fees to be taken. So depending on, like we do in private practice sometimes by ourselves, for a poor patient, we sometimes even go free also. So it's on you how much to charge. So you can always manage accordingly. For poor patients, especially in these times of need and where everybody is suffering financially, we can always consider this to go for a low rate or a concessional rate or even for charity depending on situation.
Okay. And whether it is ideal to claim the fee, the consultation fee before or after, or like whether any advertisement needs to develop.
There are various methods being followed by various doctors. There are certain centers who who ask for fees in advance. Some people don't mind taking later on. But the message is it should be very clearly communicated to patient beforehand that what is the fee structure like, either in a written method or in a verbal method. Most of the times, for those doctors who are having their own websites or their own apps, the fees is mentioned there. I personally am using a lot of apps, and on most of the apps, my consultation charges are being mentioned. There are certain situations when people come directly on smartphone using WhatsApp or other method or telephone, and those times you can really tell them that this is your consultation structure. And I don't think OPD consult is a great thing, not huge in amount, and most of the people don't mind it paying, if at all they are really getting help in such situation. And we should always it is a very economical way of getting a consultation for patient, because it really reduces the cost and stress of traveling. Even in many cities, local city, traveling costs more than a doctor's fees many times. So I don't think a fee should be issued if consultation is done with all honesty and all integrity and all seriousness. A patient should perceive seriousness from doctor. The doctor is very serious and passionately wanting that child should improve or a patient should improve.
Okay. So, sir, is there any so apart from WhatsApp or apart from telephone, is there any application if application or software is available? If yes, then which are the reliable one? Which are the most one which is best for the telemedicine?
Look, there is nothing called as best. Now, if somebody asks me who is the best doctor, the doctor who suits you most is the best doctor. So there are a lot of options available currently. And the people like me who are using their own apps, they have been into e-communication between their close groups for some time. There are corporate apps also available. Library is one very common and from some time. Practo, of course, is in one. Then there are many new apps have come up recently in this last 6 weeks. Every second or third day, we are getting a lot of new ventures into telemedicine communication. There are these all are web-based communication, and then there are also telephone-based companies also available. They have their own advantage because a lot of network is not required. Patient rural can also consult from those. And while talking to my colleagues and friends, I really found that some of the people who are of senior age group and my teachers and all those people, they are not very comfortable with typing and all this. For those, there are verbal and telephonic apps also available. So depending on what you want to do and what you want to need. But I personally would suggest that whatever app you use, it should be a combination of a written thing, a video thing, and audio thing. That makes a win-win situation for everybody.
Okay. So what are the chances of getting errors during the telemedicine consultation?
Look, I don't think the chances of error for situations which suits for a disease which is suitable for telemedicine consultation, the chances of error are more than in-person consultation. But many times I really feel it becomes better in certain aspects. For example, while counseling a mother for right doses and right treatment, when we are writing prescription, document is available with mother about every aspect of the medicine. So it becomes more easy for them to adhere to the regime. Chances are error are there only where we don't give enough time to it. So I always felt that telemedicine consultation certainly takes more time than on-floor consultation, but it can be justified by reducing the cost of traveling and and you get more patients. Now, from doctor's point of view, if you are ready to give more time, you can actually your reach of your consultation, your geographical reach goes beyond boundaries, not geographic boundaries. So, if you practice telemedicine consultation, right now when I'm sitting here, I'll get patients from Jodhpur or people around Jodhpur or likewise. But with telemedicine, I can consult people sitting in Delhi or Mumbai or even far northeast. So that extra time which we give is justified considering the number of patients which we get. But certainly, it is very clear we have to give a lot of focus on history, and we have to extract history from patient who is not in front of us. So we have to work slightly more hard, but this hardship is worth it, and it really saves us from lots of problems, reduces lots of our cost, increases lots of our reach. That's
And the question is, what are the common challenges associated with the telemedicine consultation when it comes to at the pediatrician and general practitioners level?
okay.
Most common, most common, which you come across.
Yes, the problem which I face is patients, they jump to diagnosis without giving us right information. So today morning I got some information somebody कि मेरे बच्चे की आँख में infection हो रहा है. Okay, it was basically nasolacrimal duct obstruction and watery discharge. They called it infection. So what I mean to say is we should not take history on the face value. We should not take words of a patient on face value. There may be a real misinterpretation of any sign, symptom, or a fact of a patient by a patient's mother or another caretaker, and we should actually analyze in depth about actual symptoms and signs which have led the person to think so. I had a like watery discharge about infection in the eye. When the mother told me my बच्चे की आँख में infection हुआ, I asked her, what made you think that it is infection in the eye, nothing else? Then she described the symptom, and then we reach to real diagnosis. Was something else required, not an antibiotic eye drop. Similar things happen. People call it pneumonia, people call it asthma, people call it dysentery. They're all sort of rubbish words parents use without knowing the actual meaning of it. So what we need to do as a clinician, we should go to basics. We should take every history, every word told in history in great details, understand actual meaning of what parents want to see, wants to say. So this is one thing. And second thing which is happens is drug replacement by pharmacy. We prescribe some other drug and some other, it has been replaced in the terms of a salt or a concentration or something else is being given. Is more commonly seen with drugs which have got multiple concentrations. So this is one challenge which we face. The good solution could be, you can always tell patients whenever you get the medicines, you please text us the photograph of WhatsApp the photographs of them, send the picture of them to us so that they are being confirmed. And after that, the same practice, I think telemedicine, in the same practice we are doing, we see all the medicines. We or our fellows see all the medicines once they are being prescribed. So all the things can be done to great extent by using telemedicine, and we should follow all the things in similar fashion. Same principles, same philosophy, same precautions, same strictness, everything should be done. Though it may take slightly 10%, 15%. I think that is it.
Yeah, correct. So last question. Though now telemedicine, this thing got viral or this got practiced among the doctors. But what about the patients? They are, I believe they are not aware about this particular methodology of teleconsultation.
Yes.
So what do you suggest? What are your comments when it comes to awareness about the teleconsultation at a patient level or at a general public level? Because there are guidelines for the doctor. So do you recommend to have guidelines for the patient and their caretaker as well?
Yes. I think there are some guidelines for parents also. Patients also have been there, and there are also in the these gazette also some guidelines about parents are also being mentioned. And we ourselves, every doctor, every hospital, every group is making their own guidelines for the sake of real meaning of teleconsultation, its strengths and limitations we are trying to convey. It's a new ice cream in the city, and once it's a very very tasty ice cream, and then gradually patients are getting used to it. With every passing day, the number of teleconsults in my own consultation method they are increasing, and people are really finding it happy. They are finding it very nice. They are very happy. The only problem is sometimes they start doing it in odd hours. At 10:30 they send up, if there's some tumor here, what to do, things like those.
That's what I'm saying.
Gradually everybody will learn the manners of it. Like once we had mobile phones, after coming on mobile phone, we started using it, and now gradually we are having etiquettes of mobile phones. So gradually it will, by experience and mutual teaching, things will improve. I very strongly believe it has come here to stay. It won't go. It is being used by even very, very simple people across the country. I have seen people sitting on a broken chair and talking to me on video call. Thanks to this digital technology, smartphones are there in almost every village, and this can really save a lot of hardships, a lot of lives also if done in some time. I tell you that 3 days back, I got a call from somebody who told me scorpion sting ho gaya hai. So he was confused, patient was crying. I just told him, calm down, give some analgesic and reach the nearest health center. And he reached there and he was managed. So that was giving right guidance. Otherwise, he would have rushed from a city 300 kilometers to Jodhpur. It was unnecessary suffering. So teleconsultation is
that's great, sir.
Boon for medical practice. And it's a new phenomena for all of us. We all are learning it and making new information, new rules, new guidelines.
That's great, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was wonderful session, sir.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Shalini, can we close from your end?